Great job and a great introduction to what we're going to be talking about and really what the whole West Mexico exhibit is about. And also a terrific segue to Professor John Pohl from UCLA, Department of Art History. And John has been here before and has done some research on collections at the Gilcrease. So we will be very anxious to see what he has to say.
Okay. Thank you very much. I want to thank Bob Pickering and Chris Beekman for getting me involved in this. It's a very impressive exhibition. I've done a number of exhibitions myself, but I think this is one of the real qualified success here. It's very well done. I'm very impressed. So thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to come back to Tulsa. I love Tulsa's downtown architecture. I love the Gilcrease, so this is a great opportunity for me. Now, what do I do to get my presentation up? Well, as long as we're waiting just a second. Yeah, I had, you have some very important pieces here that were acquired in the 1940s. They were produced by Aztec, or we refer to them more as the Eastern Nahua branch of the Aztecs from the plain of Puebla to Oaxaca. And they're very unique pieces. They, just as Chris was talking about, they tell stories. They actually tell stories from the codices themselves. But very few, they'd never been published really before, so I got very intrigued by some of the things you had here. I came here in 2006 and had the opportunity to study them and photograph them and then to produce rollout paintings of them so that we could really see what the story was. Then I did actually publish an article in the Gilcrease Museum magazine. You might remember that. I think it was around 2010. Oh, yeah, this is mine here. Yeah, great. Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm dealing with a later period. There are some very dramatic changes that happen in West Mexico. Chris and the other speakers are going to be talking about an earlier pre-classic to early classic period of time. We're not exactly sure what's happening in a transitional period, but by the outset of what we call the post-classic or the Toltec period, at about 900 to 1000 AD, we see what is apparently, and I've just been making my first trips to West Mexico now myself. I'm a Oaxaca specialist, but we see a sudden explosion of construction activity and possibly a large population increase and dramatic evidence of West Mexico's engagement with other civilizations in Mesoamerica, particularly along the Pacific coast. And not only Mesoamerica, but also northern Mexico and the American Southwest. West Mexico becomes directly engaged with the movement of a lot of important materials, such as turquoise. Much of the turquoise that is being used in Mesoamerica actually has its sources here in Arizona, California, New Mexico, and northern Mexico. So this is a very dramatic, there are many dramatic changes. And as you can see, and this is what interests me, on this plate, this is an image, a bowl from the site of a mapa. It dates to probably about 1350. And it portrays the face of a god who is the god of the morning star. His name was Tlahuizcalpantecutli in the Nahua language. He has a name in the Cora language of the Cora Indian people of Nayarit today. I didn't write it down. I'm just getting into this material now. We generally identify him though as Tlahuizcalpantecutli. Now, just to kind of introduce you to this post-classic period, you all know it as the Aztec period. The nation of Mexico, in constructing a national identity, embraced the Aztec Empire as its direct, as the Mexican people are the direct inheritor of this great civilization created by the Aztec. It was particularly under the President Porfirio Diaz that we see an explosion of interest in using Aztec as a national identity, and rightfully so. Subsequent excavations in downtown Mexico City show us the existence of some very impressive architecture, the Templo Mayor, for example, seen here in a reconstruction painting. The excavator, Eduardo Matos, thinks the structure was nearly 15 stories high. And all of this wealth, of course, is what we study from this particular period of time, from about 1400 to the time of the conquest, was achieved as a military empire. This is a warrior society that creates a very powerful army and begins to attack, particularly in southern Mexico, extract a lot of wealth by conquest, and the wealth is then pumped back into the city as tribute and redistributed to produce the kinds of monumental art and architecture that we see. So at the time of the conquest, this is the extent of the Aztec expansion throughout much of Mexico. Now, they haven't gotten into West Mexico directly, but they are expanding down into the Gulf, down onto the Pacific coast, especially here in Guerrero with Acapulco. There were some independent areas, Tlaxcala, of course, which provided Cortez with his first army for his first initial military campaign, and they were Eastern Nahuas, or Eastern Aztecs, and then the Mixtec and Zapotec capitals on the coast of Tututepec and Tehuantepec. Now, much of that area that you see that is conquered by the Aztec Empire is actually occupied by up to anywhere between 15 and 20 different language groups. The predominant groups are the Mixtecs, which you see in number 1 on the map, and the Zapotecs, which you see at number 2 on the map. These peoples developed this international style. This is what we call the Mixteca Puebla style. I prefer Nahua Mixteca style because it refers to the people themselves, not the cultures. And also the international style. It's a very cartoon-like style. You saw how much of an investment was made into some sophisticated writing systems in earlier periods of time. The Maya writing system, for example, or the Zapotec writing system from Monte Alban. All of that is actually, that disappears. These 12 to 15, even 20 different language groups all invest now in an international communication system. It's a very unique period of time. It actually is very effective because it empowers people of different ethnic backgrounds to create an elite identity and an elite communication system that they can apply to themselves in much the same way as we use media today. Look at your computer, for example. I've got a dog that is my search engine. I've got a talking paperclip. I mean, we're actually using these kind of pictographs all the time in our own digital technologies. Now, most of these, there were no empires or even very large cities in southern Mexico at the time. At this time, this is from about 1350 to the time of the conquest, or even they continued on later all the way up into 1600 because many of these kingdoms bonded with the Dominicans and the Franciscans and continued as powerful Indian states in the early colonial period. These are city-states. There are no empires in southern Mexico. This is what the Aztecs are taking on. They're trying to break up these confederations of city-states, which are largely formulated by intermarriages, and then to extract the wealth that is coming out of these city-states. So this is a portrayal of a royal woman in her palace, for example, in the Mixteca Alta, a reconstruction of the Temple of Heaven at a Mixtec kingdom. These marriages then, actually the marriages are coordinated through a central urban area, a large archaeological zone that you know as a contemporary city of Cholula. Here's Cholula here. And Cholula is functioning as a pilgrimage and market center. It is not a military capital as Tenochtitlan, located about 2 hours just to the northwest of Cholula by driving there. So Cholula is actually providing the ideology of centralization. This is where you go to become indoctrinated into the system and to then inherit or be given your rights and titles to rule your city-states. The Spaniards compared Cholula to being like a Vatican in the 16th century, for example. Any of you who watch the program, The Borgias, know what kind of politics is going on between a pope and all of those Italian and Spanish city-states at this time. That's exactly how the Spaniards are envisioning this system is working when they describe it. Now, Cholula had a cult temple as well. The cult temple was dedicated to a Toltec hero. His name was Quetzalcoatl, or the plumed serpent. Here's an image of Quetzalcoatl from Codex Borgia. We are very fortunate in that we have a number of codices. Chris showed you Codex Nuttall already, that document heroic stories and creation legends that are the foundation for the rights to rule by these royal families that are engaged in these constellations of marriages that override the ethnicities of these 12 or 15 different language groups. Now, the critical theme that we see, the statement of royal marriage that we can see in the Codex, actually always features a drinking vessel. And so here's a typical Mixtec drinking vessel with, it's a tripod with 3 legs. The legs end in serpents, and here's a drawing, an interpretation of exactly that same drinking vessel with the serpent legs and a frothy sort of head of chocolate on top of the bowl. The term chocolate in the Mixtec language actually refers to dowry in marriage in many of the terms for chocolate that appear in colonial dictionaries. The Gilcrease is very fortunate, and you have a number of these works in your collections. They've never even been restored, which makes them extraordinarily valuable. In fact, residue analysis can probably be done on these as well to test for chocolate, to see if chocolate actually is still contained in these. This is a beautiful piece that has medallions that feature serpent heads on them. It's done in a burnished black slip with orange or kind of a reddish slip paint, and then it has an ornamentation of white flowers, which are generally taken to be datura, which is natural LSD, and a number of other more ornamental features. Most recently has been an excavation in the Mixteca Alta of a palace at a town called Tepozcalula. This was directed by Nellie Robles of the National Institute of Anthropology and History, and Ronald Spores, Professor Emeritus of Vanderbilt University. And these turn out to be fragments of these blackware vessels with these orange medallions with images on them. So you can see that there. So this piece may very well come from Tepozcalula. Here's another piece in the Gilcrease collections, and you can see that it has the images of a number of nobles painted around the sides of this picture. I came to the Gilcrease in 2006 and did a lot of detailed photography and then reconstructed a kind of a rollout of what the scene actually portrays. And then to my amazement, it actually identified a very famous event in which a Mixtec king named Eight and his aide, his assistant, Lord Five Rain, have an encounter with a sun god who miraculously appears in a tree. This was a very dramatic event in Eitir's life. Eitir is a kind of an Achilles or even a Richard III or a Macbeth in Mixtec creation story histories. Now, one of the things that I've been able to do with the codices is show that they're more than just simply records of families and descent. They actually illustrate the construction of alliance corridors. So in this case, Codex Nuttall doesn't just document 8deer's family, it documents how his descendants were able to intermarry with two other powerful kingdoms, Teotihuacan and ultimately the Zapotec kingdom of Chile, to become the ranking sort of the title of a kind of a House of Windsor that was dominating political affairs in Oaxaca at the time, and in the 1500s, at the time the Spaniards arrived. So that's how I'm able to reconstruct these marriage alliances. Now, the fascinating thing about this is that the distribution, remember the symbol for marriage, these ceramic vessels. So the symbol for the distribution of that ceramic material should give us some kind of indication as to whether this marriage alliance system is something that I've either invented or it actually existed. And so using the research of a number of chemical research from several scientists, we find that the distribution of the polychrome ceramics matches this distribution of these marriage alliances, this constellation of marriage alliances. So this is archaeological proof that what we're getting from the documents actually existed as a real concept of political alliance through intermarriage in southern Mexico. Now, the Mixtecs in particular, and the Zapotecs, were renowned for their execution in in small portable works of art, especially in weaving, which you're still familiar with today. Is a major part of the traditions in Oaxaca today. Turquoise. Now, we know that a mask like this, which is preserved in the British Museum, could have over 20,000 individual pieces of tesserae, or turquoise, that are worked into this mask. Imagine what it's like to even shape these things. Some of them are only 2 to 5 millimeters in width. We have some recent research in which we know that that mask in particular was presented by the founder of the Dominican Order in Oaxaca to Pope Clement VII, and it was explained that these masks were used to talk to the dead. In other words, they were placed over mummies, and then one could actually access or it was believed talk to the spirit of a deceased ancestor through these masks. Now, gold was also introduced at this time. Metallurgy is introduced to West Mexico in this earlier period, probably back by maybe 850, 900 AD. It's a technology that's coming into West Mexico from Central America. And then, of course, tropical bird feathers. And what I've been proposing then is that these constellations of marriages are not just about accrued power, in other words, inherited power, but real power in terms of control over the arts. So we know we have documents that and statements that a lot of these works of art were traded in dowry and bride wealth systems. So a ruler who could marry as many as 20 or 30 times, and he's not in love with all of these people. This is just simply how he's building actually a very powerful artistic force in his palace. Most of the women are becoming the economic engine for this gift award system. His first wife will be the mother of the heir to the throne, but his second wife might be a top embroiderer. Her son, in turn, may become the merchant. Her second son might become the primary jeweler, producing jewels that are then exchanged in a bride wealth system for a third wife, who might be a painter, for example. Now, this kind of system would have a greater draw and fascination on the exotic, the more exquisite your materials that you're producing. The rarer the materials are, the longer distances they come from, is going to put a lot of competition into these royal houses to come up with better and better, rarer and rarer materials, and more highly crafted art to acquire, to invest in these marriage alliance systems. And this is what's producing the acquisition of this art, from spondylus shell here all the way down in Ecuador to turquoise coming out of the American Southwest. It's all being pumped into West Mexico and ultimately Oaxaca here. Now, the curious thing about this is that I talked about how the marriage alliance system can be seen in the ceramics itself. But a curious thing that happens is that in West Mexico, between probably about 1200 to 1350, 1400, we have a manifestation of exactly the same international style and polychrome system. This is a writing system, and it's done in painted vessels. Now, from my perspective, we don't have to say anything more. It's very obvious to me that these people are intermarrying with these people, even though they're located 1,000 miles up the coast. Now, the vessels are exquisitely painted and very, very detailed. They would probably, at this point, we can probably be talking about people who are directly ancestral to the Cora and Huichol people of Nayarit. Now, a pioneer in the study of these was a Los Angeles resident, but originally trained in Mexico. I believe he was German, he may have been Austrian originally. It was Hasso von Winning, and Hasso von Winning was a consultant to Gilcrease. He was a consultant to the Stendhal Gallery in Los Angeles that provided many of the pieces to the Gilcrease collection. And he had the opportunity to sit down and actually draw out a number of these vases when they came into Los Angeles in the 1960s. And these are some of his drawings, his initial sketches. I'm using these as the basis to create rollout paintings of these. Now, the one that interests me the most at first here is this very curious birth ritual. Chris showed you an image of this as well. It's a woman giving birth to this very odd character coming out between her legs. She's attended by midwives. And then there's an individual here with a staff. Another individual is kind of covering his face. There's another individual covering his face here. And then the presentation of this very odd character by the midwives in front of or perhaps on top of some kind of a textile. Now, we see that same scene here in Codex Nuttall. And what strikes me, and this is why I'm connecting so much of this imagery from West Mexico to the Mixtec specifically, because there's so many details that are obvious. I think you can see a comparison here that even the woman who's giving birth, you have to turn your head sideways a little bit to see the little guy coming out. But she even has a plumed serpent rising up over her body in exactly the same way that it's appearing here with Lady Three Flint, who's giving birth to her daughter. This cannot be coincidental. This is to us who work with this as a writing system. This is direct evidence of people who are in direct contact with each other. This is the little figure himself. He's kind of dwarf-like, and he has a fanged tooth with these kind of bumps on his head. Now, that would be very peculiar and hard to understand from a West Mexican perspective alone, and here's my drawings of him, but in reality, he's very famous to us in Oaxaca. He's a very specific type of deity that we call a nu'u. A nu'u, Mixtec's a tonal language. The nu'u, as you can see, is actually a manifestation of the earth. It's an anthropomorphic spirit. Here it is as involved with the birth of maize. Here it is as actually directing the rain to fall. Here's a little wooden nu'u that's giving birth to a little lord here, and yet he also has genitalia underneath him. So it has a kind of it's a bisexual earth in a sense. You can see the little bumps or horns on his head, which are a reference to the fact that he's made of stone or a hill or the earth itself. When we look at a second vase here, we have a very complex scene that's now in the Los Angeles County Museum of Art. This scene interests me a great deal because it portrays an individual, perhaps a little maize god, who's being attended by two women who pour water over him in a purification ceremony as two rain gods fly overhead. Now compare that then to this scene of a marriage in Codex Nuttall. We see the two women pouring bowls of water over the marriage couple in much the same way in a purification ritual. Here we see another purification ritual in which a Lord Eight Wind has a flying rain god over him who's blessing him with a pitcher of water. These rituals are directly related to purification rituals, especially at the birth of royal children. And so we still have records of this as being a purification ritual associated with Kora, Metote dances and Kora rites. It's related in the accounts of Friar Bernardino de Sahagún upon the naming of a child, and then the fact that we can coordinate or correlate these scenes so closely between what are painted on the vases and scenes we see in the Mixtec codices is really remarkable. Now, here is another type of ceramic, and I was very interested to see that one of these is in the exhibition. It's a kind of a tanware, and the one that you have in the exhibition is a bowl with a plume serpent on it, a Quetzalcoatl serpent on it. It sometimes has some red decoration. This is one that turned up recently, and because this material is so little known, we're discovering it in the oddest places. A colleague said that from State University of New York, Buffalo, said that a man came in and had bought this at a gun show and brought this in and showed it to her. And on closer examination, the fine line work that is on it depicts a very important scene that has to do with the time when the sun was created, when the sun appeared for the first time to illuminate the world. Imagine that turning up at a gun show. The piece has since gone into the collections at the State University. Now, it's very close in conception to a ritual of the creation of the first sun in the Mixtec Codex Vienna. I think you can see the little deity seated inside of the sun disk. In this case, the sun was created together with other false suns, and these suns were not successful and fell back over the horizon line of the Earth, but the true sun finally rose through through a cascade of blood, and finally rose into the sky. Here's the image as it actually appears in Codex Vienna. Vienna is very detailed in telling us how this event took place. All of the gods came together, including Quetzalcoatl. They had a mushroom ceremony, an hallucinogenic mushroom ceremony, and through this, together with a drinking ceremony called forth by singing, they sung to the sun and entreated the sun to appear on the earth for the first time. Now, we can correlate, this is where the importance of these vases from West Mexico will become clear. The Mixtec codices, we can read these and correlate them with specific ruins. Look at this little ruin on top of this mountain in the Achutla Valley in the Mixtec Alta. This mountain is still called Hill of the Sun today. And the legends are still told by Mixtec people that this is where the sun was first created. There are other indicators of hieroglyphic place signs that tell us that it's linked specifically with this archaeological site. Now that's important because it implies then, this is all just getting started, this is a whole new field, but it implies that we can start to associate many of these peregrinations and rituals of the Huichol with specific locations, such as their place where the sun rose for the first time. Okay, well that's the potential in a lot of this. Am I running out of time? Yeah. So I'll just show you something very quickly here. There's the potential for understanding another manifestation of the ceramic, which are these stucco figurines. They have gold relief on them, which suggests they may be connected to even some of these masks. They can be put together to tell stories too, which is what Chris was suggesting. And we can put them into correlations with the codices. Here's one that just turned up. I saw this last summer. It's a marriage on a stucco platform, but it's a marriage, as we see here. But we can associate these with real places, or at least the concept of real places, such as a royal house that can be identified archaeologically. So this is just sort of a brief introduction of what the potential is in looking at these vases and extracting an entire society and understanding of this society from this kind of analysis. Thank you very much for inviting me.